Hi, this is Marlo Balmanno, the producer of Latter-day Left. This week we bring you a double episode of Politics and General Conference Notes. Anneke Garcia joins Alain and Cris Balmanno for a touching conversation about faith in the state of society. Part 1 includes listener letters, Trump's tax returns, the change to the policy concerning children of LGBTQ couples, questioning doctrine is part of our faith, and pondering and praying. Remember, if you like our podcast, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts or on podbean.com. Now, on to the show.
Hi, and welcome to another edition of Latter-day Left. I'm Chris.
I'm Anneke.
And I'm Alan.
And we have all three of us here today.
This is awesome. I love it when we're all here.
So, we are recording just after conference, so we're going to be talking about conference.
Yeah.
We're going to be talking about some stuff that happened before conference.
And some stuff that happened during conference.
But
maybe stuff that happened after conference. We don't know yet.
We don't know. That's right.
Who knows where this is going to go? First, we're going to start off with the listener comment.
We have a listener comment?
We
We
did.
have one listener.
I didn't know. We have one listener.
We have one listener, and he made a comment. No,
we have three people on the podcast. We have one listener. At this point,
yeah. Okay, Eugene sent us a message on Facebook. A Facebook Messenger message.
oh, cool! I didn't know.
When we say you can contact us on Facebook,
It
he
works.
did. It did, yeah. So Eugene actually asked us a question a while ago. We've been talking when the Democrats got elected. We said we don't think that the Democrats in Congress should go after the tax returns. And Eugene said, "Hey, did you guys really just say that? Please explain yourselves." And we did.
We did? I don't remember that.
We did. Trust me.
Good. Okay.
That's why I'm here. And then, so he asked us again this past week because it was brought up again.
Well, because they've issued the subpoenas now.
Right. They issued the subpoena. So he asked us to weigh in on what we thought about the subpoenaing the tax returns.
Right.
And Mulvaney, I believe it was. Mulvaney.
Right.
Saying, yeah, it's never going to happen.
Right.
So
here's
Eugene wants us to
weigh in on that?
Weigh in again on tax returns.
So here's my way in. I don't know if it's a good idea or a bad idea. At this point, I don't think it's a bad idea necessarily. I think the Democrats have got far more bigger problems in terms of making sure that they get somebody in the White House next time than going after the taxes. The response I liked is the AOC response when Trump said, "Never going to get my tax return," and apparently it's now been echoed by the chief of staff. Her response was, "We didn't ask you." The subpoena doesn't go to him. The subpoena goes to the IRS. The head of the IRS will be subpoenaed to come in. This is a power that can be enforced. And if he doesn't come in and if he doesn't turn it over, then Congress can issue a demand that the subpoena be enforced by the Department of Justice. Now, granted, the Department of Justice
is full of his friends right now.
It's full of his friends. And so now you're going to have a constitutional crisis. I say, you don't want to obey a subpoena from the Congress? Bring it on. Because the constitutional crisis is going to drive all of these people right out of the door. Because whatever you can think of, whether or not they should look at his or have access to his. By the way, the law is very specific. The United States Congress has the authority to subpoena any person's tax records in the country. Any. The law does not protect the president. This is not an executive privilege issue. And so if the subpoena is not obeyed by the IRS and the Congress demands that the subpoena be enforced, and the Justice Department refuses to enforce it, now you have a constitutional crisis, and now these people are bringing down the country. And I think if you want to play that game, 2020 is going to look really good for Democrats.
Yeah.
It may save the Democrats from themselves.
Here's the thing. It's not a question of can they. For me, it's not. They can subpoena the tax returns all they want. Should they? Is it worth the time and effort and the political capital and the circus it's going to create? What are we going to do?
Well, we hardly live in a freaking circus.
Well, we're in the circus. Okay.
There's no new circus that we haven't already.
But do we need to set the circus tent on fire?
I think we need to tear down the whole circus at this point.
I feel like the people want to know if their president is a crook.
Here's the thing.
But we know he is.
We don't have anything. It's all this slippery, stupid stuff.
The New York Times published everything showing.
The
The Times published almost everything
the New York
showing
Times
he's
is a bunch
crook.
of liberals. They just lie. Like, it's so far, everything has been able to just slip.
But what's going to happen?
You know,
if he cheated on his taxes or didn't file a tax return or falsified a tax return, are they going to bring impeachment? Are they going to start impeachment process?
That actually, okay. So
what's the end game here other than embarrassing Trump and trying to make a point?
I don't think it's about embarrassing Trump. I think it is about defending the power of the legislative branch. Number one, I think it is about stemming the power grab by the executive branch. And I do think that right now you have nothing to even file an impeachment with. But I do think that if you have 6 years of his return, so they've asked for 6 years, 2 years of his presidency and the 4 years before that, if you find out that in fact he has lied, he has falsified his tax returns, there are issues there, there is now impeachable offenses. Because, I mean, let's take it into the realm of impeachment generally. It's very difficult to impeach because it's really just a political game, especially when it comes to the president.
Right, we've talked about this.
But judges who are appointed for life, the last few judges that have been impeached because of tax evasion and tax fraud.
Well,
so now you have,
Well, I don't know as much about it as Alan does, obviously, but isn't it an attempt to draw a line of what he can get away with? Because so far, everything he's like, you know, in his life experience up until now has been be shady enough to get away with it and still get whatever you want out of it. You know, so far we've got like his personal lawyer is locked up, his campaign people are locked up, and he's able to technically slip out of everything. If we had something, you know, it's an Al Capone situation, right?
Yep.
You know, and it's like,
but he's not going to go to jail.
No, he's not going to go to jail.
They're not going to remove him from office. They're not going
to. They could actually remove him from office.
The Senate will never convict him.
Well, you know what? That's going to make them look really terrible. You know, if we have something obvious.
If the Senate,
McConnell won't even let it come up to. I guarantee you it wouldn't happen.
But the point, I think that's the point. I think at some point, if the Republicans say, nope, we don't care, even though what he's done is an impeachable offense, and we now have proof without any doubt of the impeachable offense, I think that is the death knell for all of those Republicans.
Or it at least gets it on the record what they're actually standing up for.
And I think, yeah.
You know, and they're still trying to cover like, oh, well, it's the honor of the presidency is at stake. And, oh, well, I won't. And I'm like, if we remove as much as we can of that BS and just like lay it out for how it is, and you still vote that way, and people still vote for you, I
don't see it happening that way.
Well, okay, maybe it doesn't happen that way, but I think it's worth going after. It's my answer to your question is yes. This is a fight worth picking. The Mueller report, unredacted, 400 pages, total complete.
That I think is worth fighting for.
And so is the tax return. Let me tell you something. His entire position on the tax return thing is fraught with his usual nonsense. Okay? And I think, yes, we go after it. And if they don't get it, then the Republicans are creating a constitutional crisis that will make even the centrist vote for the leftists.
You may have
I'm telling you,
it may have the exact opposite effect. You could actually end up here's my fear is that okay, they get the tax returns. We know they're shady. Otherwise, he'd have released them forever.
He'd have released them years ago.
And I can't release them. I'm being audited. Well, if you're being audited, then obviously they were shady to begin with. There's something not there.
Not really. I mean, people get audited. You know, I was audited for crying out loud. There was nothing wrong with my tax return.
There was nothing wrong
I passed the audit, but still I was audited.
But he was saying he was being audited for like the last 8 years or something. And so they're auditing.
He says the numbers are big and that's why he's being audited.
Yeah.
Well,
look, we know they're shady. Okay? Otherwise, he'd have given them to us. My fear is that they're gonna get them. There's gonna be discrepancies. There's gonna be some bad stuff in there. Stuff he didn't declare. Stuff he over exaggerated because he never exaggerates on anything.
He's the person who exaggerates least in the entire world.
Yeah. Wait, hold on. So they're gonna the House will impeach him. The Senate will McConnell will just obstruct and run out the clock, and it'll never come to even a vote or anything.
But I think it'll cost them votes.
I mean, isn't it just about
Here's what- I
preserving the
think going
integrity
through
of
the
the
whole
system
thing-
at this point? You know?
But they're going to spin it. They're going to say, see, it's going to be spun, and they're going to alienate the middle.
I don't think they will.
And people are going to be, by the time the election comes around, people are going to be so sick of everything, they're not going to vote. You're going to get people staying out of it, and then you're going to energize the Republican base to the point where you could see a second term. See, they attacked him. They're going to stop at nothing. They will use it. They will spin it.
Well,
and
I'm sure
those
they
people,
will.
those people are going to vote for him no matter what.
Well,
I'm sure-
There's like his weird little coterie of like, I'm going to support whatever he does, and there's no speaking reason. But there's a big chunk of America that's not that far yet. And I don't think 50% of America is in the we're going to support him no matter what.
We're not.
camp.
I don't
Right,
think so.
but 50%, you don't need 50% of America. You
Right.
need 50%, you don't even need, we've proven you don't even need 50% of the voters.
Right. You need 50% of Michigan and Ohio. And
Yeah.
Right, you need
But-
Michigan, Ohio, and Florida, and a couple others.
Yeah.
But you just need
I'd like to
50% of the people who vote in those states. And if the people don't come out and vote because a pox on both their houses, this could have a bad effect.
Well, I think right now.
And is it, so you're right, I think the Mueller report, but the Mueller report could do the same thing.
Sure, it could. Anything to do at this point, because you're not talking rationality anymore. You are talking passion, and you're talking actual irrational. The people who go to these Trump rallies, it is a religion. It is a cult at this point. It truly is a cult. Fox News has gone from being the conservative channel to being the government information channel. At this point,
They did that. They were that under Bush.
no, they were conservative under Bush. They were certainly anti-Obama during the Obama years.
In Bush's second term, they were.
But they've gone from
I think it went from in the second Bush term. It went from them taking the talking points from the White House to now they're giving the talking points to the White House.
not only you're right.
But
let me tell you something.
But
let me tell you something.
that relationship has been there
the
since the
former
second.
vice president of Fox is now, wait for it, he's Josh Lyman. He's the assistant chief of staff. Okay, he's the assistant chief of staff.
Well, and how it's shown how talking points will show up there and then work their way into Trump's speech. It's like it's so closely connected to the White House in a way that it never was.
So now it's
under
not just a conservative viewpoint. Now it's propaganda. Now it is the state. It's the 1984 state message machine.
Right, which I'm saying they've been for a long time. But
I
don't think it's new with the Trump.
It's to the
with
point
Trump.
where
I
they're
think
not even they can't even find people to write their headlines that know basic Central American geography anymore.
The idea.
Okay, but before we
point
get
is-
into the three Mexicos,
Which was my favorite joke of the week, by the way.
really, because mine's wind cancer.
Wind cancer.
We'll get there.
No, my point about that is that if you talk to the people in the media, they will tell you that there has now been a line that has been crossed that was not there 2 years ago, that was not there under Bush. So, for example,
Well, I'm saying it's the dynamic flipped. The information used to flow from the White House to Fox now goes the other way.
Yeah, but I'm saying that there is now a something that's actually very different. So they went down to the border. He went down to the border, and the press got down there, and the media wasn't allowed to go beyond a certain point. But Sean Hannity was in with them and telling them how to set things up. And so, in other word, Hannity was in the government side.
Yeah.
The press was on the outside.
Hannity needs to be investigated for a lot of things, I think. Hannity is...
It's freedom of the press.
Yeah, he's not press at this point.
No, you're right. He's not press.
That's what we're saying.
He's puppet,
It's
but
gone.
He's a puppet.
Well, no,
he may be the puppet master.
That's what
at
I'm
this
saying.
point.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I'm saying under Bush, they were the puppets. Now they're the puppet masters. They're the ones giving orders.
You and I agree on this. Because even though we're using different terminology, so there has been a line that has been crossed.
I agree that the line has been crossed
it is.
because
By the way,
it used to be the White House said, these are our talking points, and Fox would go, right, and they'd put them up on their screen and they'd talk about them for 2 days. But now Fox says, here's our talking points, and the White House goes, right. And
let me tell you where that shows up. We all know Sinclair. We have Channel 2 here in Utah. There's Sinclair Company. Sinclair is a conservative machine, okay? But Sinclair doesn't toe St. Clair was basically a conservative, anybody but Trump group, and St. Clair has been aced out. Some of their we want to consolidate markets and buy radio stations and TV stations has now been voted down by the SEC, in part because they were the anti-Trump conservatives. So what's happening is that the Fox machine, working with the executive branch, they're not taking out the liberals. They think they've got those beat. They're now taking out the anti-Trump conservative.
Right.
So this is a level of activism that I think goes well beyond, we're just a conservative noise machine.
Oh yeah, no, it's not media at this point. They are a pack.
It's propaganda.
They're a pack.
Yeah. It's propaganda.
It's the Fox News pack.
And unless we come across as this is just the alternate conspiracy theory, right? Because that's what some people would hear these arguments like, well, you guys are just saying that because
we're saying that because it happened.
And the difference is the journalistic standards that at least the Fox News of the past kind of pretended to.
They did have.
They had to cite
or
such
tried.
and such,
they
or get an expert on such and such, or get a source on such and such.
They made an effort to at least look like they were trying.
Right.
So as bad as Roger Ailes was. Mm-hmm. He did try to, listen, we're a conservative viewpoint, but we have these standards. But we're going to
back it up with something,
correct.
Right? And that's what you do in, any sort of discourse that needs to be taken seriously on a professional level. That's what you have to do in science and academia and stuff.
Exactly.
Right? You have to cite it and back it up. People can still disagree with you, and they can go after the veracity of your sources, but you have them there. And now it's to the point where, and I don't know if this is the same event that you were talking about where Sean Hannity was, but one of the ones where Trump was down at the border, he was showing new sections of the border wall that were not new. There were portions of fences that had already been there. So this is the point where we're putting up something that's false.
That's false. Knowing it to be false.
That the other guys who did their journalistic work are proving is false because they're citing this fence was actually here before.
During Bush years.
The really obvious stuff they shouldn't have to cite as, to do due diligence to be like, this is not reality. And there's a segment of people now who don't even care. Yeah. Because it's about, well, what are those, I can bring up something I heard on NPR, which is a pretty balanced, they've obviously got a slight obvious bias, but you'll hear them interviewing an Israeli and a Palestinian on a story. They've got a pretty good, balanced approach to things. I can't even bring up the point I heard because as soon as I heard, well, there is a story on NPR, I'll get people saying, oh, you can't listen to anything NPR says. They're just these liberal, it's past the factual realm of what we have to talk about.
No, there is no more. And
it's the decision on what your final feeling already was, and then you go back post hoc.
It's the confirmation bias.
Yes, right. It's post hoc.
Right.
Ergo proctor hoc.
Right. And it's just so it's so loud and prevalent and emotionally charged that you can't attack it. You can't address it.
Can I bring this down to a really small Utah story, really quick? So,
this started as what we thought about the tax returns being
right, and now, this is a conversation, right? And this is what we do. We have a conversation, and it meanders. Lehi, Utah, is going after the moms and the kiddies because of chalk writings on the sidewalks. Yeah. There is a Geneva Rock and Quarry has a huge thing. They've been eating up the point of the mountain for years, and now they want to put a mine and excavate and. They've
reached the limit of where they're allowed to dig, and they want an exemption to dig.
Exactly. And of course, the people are like, no, we're already dying because of the bad air that you're creating here. And now you're going to destabilize the whole mountain, and we can't breathe. And so the kiddies have been writing in chalk, I heart clean air, or Geneva needs to stop. And Lehi says, hey, this is criminal mischief. And we're going to arrest you, and we're going to arrest the moms. Listen. This is a First Amendment freedom of speech issue, because if I were to write in chalk, the mayor's great, Geneva's great, nobody would take me to court. So it's not about criminal mischief. It's about freedom of speech. And once again, we're seeing an oppressive government. This time it's the town of Lehi and Draper, the mayor in Draper who's in cahoots with those people because he gets lots of money from Geneva for his re-election campaign. And now we're seeing that what do we call it? Corruption. That's what we call it. We're seeing corruption, and we're seeing violation of the First Amendment, freedom of speech. There's a difference between
sidewalk chalk. It'll wash off with the next good rain, or
it's not spray paint.
This isn't permanent. This isn't paint. This isn't destructive.
That's why it's only criminal
Although,
mischief.
yeah, and if you paint, I wonder if it would be the same charge, because we got in my neighborhood people tag stuff all over. The Parks Department has to come and paint over it, and like it's just an accepted thing.
Right.
Nobody's waiting up late at night to find out whose kid it is and arrest their mom.
But in that thing, in your neighborhood, they're not painting over it because of the content of the speech. Right. Here,
it has nothing to do with
it's
the content
clearly
of the speech.
to do.
Right.
It's everything to do with the content of the speech. Okay, and so if the kids were drawing pictures of spring on the sidewalk, the mayor of Lehigh and the mayor of Draper wouldn't be upset by that at all. So we've got big fascists in the White House, and we got little fascists in our little own towns right here in America, Utah.
They may be big fascists here in a little town in Utah. You don't know. Why do you call them little fascists? Just because Lehigh's a little town? They could be big fascists.
Oh, I think they're probably big fascists.
They could be little fascists with big dreams.
I'm sorry. What did you say?
Little fascists with dreams of being big fascists? Are they going to step it up? No, wait. This wasn't an idea. So.
It's a Mussolini thing, He started out as a little guy.
So did Hitler. I mean, all right, there you go, Eugene. We talked about the taxes.
Thank you, Eugene. I really appreciate how you get us going on that. Maybe you're right, Eugene. Maybe it's not a good idea for the Democrats. Frankly, I think
Eugene wanted him to go after the taxes. And when we said earlier, when I made the comment, when the Democrats were first elected in November, I said they shouldn't do it.
Yeah,
it's a publicity stunt.
Not...
I think Eugene's answer was first, wait,
why not?
Did you really just say that? Why wouldn't you go after him?
Yeah.
I'm still on the, you're going to embarrass him and maybe you're going to get some votes. And ultimately, I don't know that it's worth I'm actually
the
with three-ring circus.
I flipped and I flopped.
There you go. We got a flip-flopper. Maybe you could run for... Oh, you already ran for office.
You ran for office.
How'd that go? Never mind.
You know exactly how it turned out.
Yes, I know.
Okay?
I remember.
Mr. Campaign Manager.
Only the first one. All right, we're going to move on. So, conference. We said there was conference. We watched conference
it was
yesterday
awesome.
and today.
I like conference.
Pre-conference, at the church's leadership meeting pre-conference, there was a big announcement. What was that, Thursday?
Yeah,
was it Thursday?
I thought it was a week before, but maybe not. It had to be a few days.
It was only a couple days before conference.
It was midweek, I think.
It was like Wednesday or Thursday. It wasn't Friday. It was Wednesday or Thursday. They made an announcement that they were reversing a bit of the policy about LGBTQ
children.
The children of
LGBT families.
Yes, LGBT families.
I think it was a great change.
The children can now be baptized as long as both parents are on board, where before they couldn't. The children... the parents are now not automatically considered to be in apostasy.
Right. They can bring the children in.
If you're a married gay couple, you're not automatically labeled apostate.
Right.
You can bring the child in for blessing when a child is 8 years old. Right. The child can be baptized. You
can request that the baby be blessed with the understanding that, hey, if we do this, they're on the name, they're on records of the church. There's going to be contact, and someone's going to come and say, hey, we want to baptize the kid. And so as long as you're on board with all that stuff,
which many families were,
in a lot of cases it was blended families where one parent was in a gay relationship, the other was still active in the church, and it was there's a lot of different situations.
There were a lot of situations, but I really did think it seemed to me that here's the resilience of the faith of some people, that in the face of the prior policy, they were still believing. They were still.
Well, yeah, and it's been really hard for a lot of people.
And it's been hard for
I think the hard part for most of them wasn't the kids couldn't get blessed or baptized. It was if you're in a homosexual marriage, you're automatically in apostasy.
Yes.
You are that's it. You are an apostate, and we're taking you we're going to take disciplinary action. And
so I think
now this is
going to help that.
I think
it's going to help the children.
Yeah.
And here's why it was important, because it was a double standard, because we were making a homosexual marriage into more of a sin than other similar okay, like you're gay and you have a boyfriend or girlfriend, or you live together, or you're heterosexual and you commit adultery, which is one of the top 10, was not an automatic apostasy.
No, you're not an
obviously people.
You're not an apostate.
Obviously it's not. The church does not condone that. But
no, we don't.
Right, but if you're going to go with the top 10 and you committed adultery, you didn't necessarily get excommunicated. There was a repentance process. It's kind of a bigger deal.
And that's
but there was a way
common.
through. You weren't automatically excommunicated and told you can't come. Your children can come, but they can't be baptized and all this.
And that's why it was a double standard, and that's way more common, right? Because 90%, give or take, as far as they know, 90% of the population are heterosexual. That happens a lot more often than people in the church, active members of the church, being gay, getting married, right? And here's the big sticking point for me, and this is why it's been such a tough issue for me. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of people with a lot of different feelings, but there's no other sin. If we're going to say that, this homosexual marriage and relationships are a sin, there's no other sin that teenage kids were killing themselves over because they didn't feel that they could change it. There are no teenage kids saying, I'm just really too afraid I'm going to commit adultery one day and I can't take it anymore. This was a unique facet of people's identity that, and the policy change itself scared them. The cultural attitude about it itself was so devastating because a lot of people have tried. They've done the traditional years back thing of, well, just marry a person of the opposite gender and it'll be fine. Or if you just, work really hard and read your scriptures and pray a lot, God will take this away from you. Like there was
pray
something
the gay away.
Exactly. And
or
those
the conversion
really,
therapy.
And that is not that far behind us in our past. And people
it's still it's not even behind us in our past because they tried to pass a conversion therapy ban bill and it got so watered down that it's basically meaningless. Mm-hmm. And unless they're hooking up electrodes to your skin and trying to shock it out of you, they're still allowed to scare you and guilt you and do all these mental exercises on you to try and convert you.
And to be fair to the church was in favor of the ban.
Of the original ban as it was written. Not, and then as soon as it got rewritten, everyone was like, "Hey, we're out. You guys, this doesn't have our name on it anymore."
There's so much cultural stuff on top of whatever the church's official position is.
That's very true.
So there's the church's, there's the doctrine, then there's the church's policy, and then there's the cultural stigma or whatever, which just piles on. When the change was announced and it was blowing up all over social media and everything, and the word was getting out, I went on a little bit of a rant on Thursday or Friday on the difference between doctrine and policy.
Yes.
And I said, it's got to be frustrating because 3.5 years ago, and let's face it, this is policy. These people were told you are automatically an apostate and your children, while they're welcome to come to church, we're never going to tell people they can't enter the building. They can't take part in anything else.
Right.
There's no baptism. There's no getting the priesthood. There's no going, to the temple, baptism for the dead. Anything until the kid's over 18.
And disavows, and specifically disavows your relationship.
Specifically disavow your parents, and you have to do. And you're being told one thing: the families are, loving, but not your family. Your family, nobody is
right. But I think you're correct. It was policy.
But it was policy,
not doctrine.
And then 3.5 years later, they're like, "Oh no, we're changing this," and it's got to be frustrating because both times, and I'm going to have to walk on eggshells a little bit here. Because both times they've said, by revelation, this is it.
And that's why people
are like, whoa, if it's revelation...
That's why people are upset.
3 years ago, why is it revelation now?
I don't know that I heard the revelation thing.
It was said, we were in the temple and we felt
when the policy was first announced, they said, this is by revelation to the prophet.
Confirming witness of
and then this past week on Thursday, they said, this is by revelation to the prophet. This is how it is. Mm-hmm. And if you're using that word revelation, to me, and this is where I went on my rant, it had better be doctrinal.
Yeah.
The word revelation is, unless it's, hey, you really screwed this up.
Right.
You're correcting it.
You can get revelation to correct a bad policy.
Right.
So I don't have any problem with them coming back this time.
That's why I'm saying...
Right, but it was the first time when it came back to kind of...
I don't remember that. I can
ask the producer to look it up.
And that's okay. I don't necessarily question,
It was an explanation after the fact, too. It wasn't, the church didn't come announce. And they didn't even announce it the first time. It was just in the handbook.
It was in a handbook. As I remember it was in a handbook.
It got slipped in and then...
Yeah. So it got put in the handbook. Which is why, there may be different degrees of revelation here, okay? Do you get revelation if you're a Sunday school teacher to teach a lesson? That's a different degree of revelation than the guy who's writing the manual. That's a different degree.
Right, and that's why I said I'm walking on eggshells when I'm saying this.
Right.
But my rant was there's policy and there's doctrine. And so far, none of this has, it's all been policy based.
Right.
This is just how, we deal with this as people and as administratively. It's an administrative policy. It's not.
Yeah.
Well, and I think the bigger issue too that's difficult is there are times when prophets and apostles and church leaders are wrong about things, and that's hard for us.
In the history of the church,
about.
they have been.
There's quotes. I have a quote from Bruce R. McConkie saying he was wrong in the past.
Yes, so do I. So do I.
On
the priesthood change in 1978.
Ignore anything that I or anyone else has said on the subject. We were at a less enlightened time. But we live, and this is the quote. I think we've said this before. Someone said, Catholics believe that the Pope is infallible, but they act like they don't. Mormons believe that the prophet is fallible, but act like he is.
Like he's not.
And that's a problem because of the cultural repercussions of things like that.
Right.
Because as soon as everyone in your ward and your neighborhood is like, oh, well, you heard the church policy change, so obviously those people advocating for gay rights are, way off their rockers. There's not a safe place to come to different conclusions.
Well, and there's not. Well, there's. I really hate the term "safe place" because it conjures, safe spaces and snowflakes and all the stuff that liberals get accused of.
I don't think those are bad things.
Right.
But people will say that.
But people spin it negatively. But there's also very little room in the culture, especially here in Utah, but within the church, but really here in Utah, for you to say, or anyone to say, why was it Revelation 3 years ago and now it's a different revelation?
Exactly.
Things really haven't changed that much, and it's really the same group of guys minus one.
Well, but it depends. Again, it depends.
But I'm saying
it depends on where it came from.
Right. But I'm saying there's no
tolerance
in the culture to just wonder out loud and try to work through the process. If I say, man, it's going to take me a little bit to wrap my head around the 360 and they're kind of jerking the chain a little bit, or it feels like, I'm being yanked around, not deliberately, but I'm having a bit of whiplash. There's nowhere for you to kind of, I'm not even saying disagree, but we're told question and pray and get, as soon as you start even asking the question, the culture
is
knocks you down, and there's no tolerance for it.
You're told to get your own,
and that's my point. Is that there is no tolerance for people who
get your own
witness of things, and they say, but it's implied, and it's going to be the same as ours. That's what and that is large, not just here in U.S., not just here in Utah, in other places in the church. It's kind of implied. It's like, oh yeah, you're supposed to pray and get your own witness, and then you'll finally agree with me.
Yeah, and that last part is the part that I think.
The one little nice thing, there's some nice moments in conference. One of them that was really refreshing to hear was Sister Sharon Eubanks talk today. She said there were things a couple years ago that I had a hard time with, and I prayed about it, and I had to exercise faith to get over it. And that was as explicit as a recognition of that as we got recently. And so, and I know it's there, and I see it. President Uchtdorf has said things in the past that church leaders have made mistakes in the past.
Yes.
But it doesn't ever get super explicitly said, and people are frustrated by that. And I don't know if that's a cultural thing because we all just want to be happy and not make ripples.
Do you want... And I just thought about this because to my recollection, let's face it, I don't remember a whole lot, but I don't know of any time in conference where someone's gotten to the pulpit and said, I had a problem with this and I had to really kind of come around and exercise faith and, just at some point just accept that, okay, if the church is true and if the prophet's a prophet, then this is the way it's going to be.
I think there have been talks about that.
But it's not very clear and it's not very,
it's overarching. If you have questions, there's never been, and what I'd like to see personally, and maybe I'm wrong, I want to see a general authority get up, a member of the 70, a member of the 12, and say, because they come out and they said, look, we are all of one mind after a lot of talking and prayer and fasting. It's a united front. Who were the voices of dissent, and how long did it take them to come around?
And we
I don't need individual specific stories, or this is how I came around. I questioned this. The prophet brought it to us as the 12. I had a hard time with it for a couple days, but after a lot of fasting and prayer.
So the closest you get to that...
But you never hear that.
Well, the closest you get to that is a Bruce R. McConkie thing that Anneke was just mentioning, where And that has been well documented now. Spencer W. Kimball.
Because it's safe, because it's far enough in the past.
Because it's far enough in the past.
And there's stuff between David
and they're all
McKay
dead. And they're all dead.
There's evolution stuff back then in the day when you find out that the apostles disagreed on stuff. And they talked about it a lot.
Right. Well, where's the Elder Holland who said, I wasn't convinced when they presented this. Me and a couple others weren't sure, and we talked about it, and there was a lot of back and forth, and now we're of one mind eventually. Mm-hmm. But you don't hear, they come out and we are of one mind.
That's because they decide only when they're all done. Now, sometimes the prophet will say, go back and think about it some more. Here's the other thing. If anything, I think Elder Holland would have been...
I picked his name out of the hat. I could have said Uchtdorf, and people would listen to him and okay, that makes more sense.
No. Now, if you'd have said Oaks, if you'd have said, who was one of the ones that talked today? Mr. Law and Order.
No, and I wasn't talking specifically about the policy. No. I'm just saying in general.
But I'm saying that if you pick a position where the church is, let's say, more open to things than law and order, and if you say something like, okay, well, it might have been Down Oaks, it might have been this person or that person. So we can go into the history, and you get, okay, well, yeah, that would make sense that they would, but they're not going to come out and ever tell you. You're never going to get a minority opinion from the Quorum of the 12.
Opinion.
No, I don't want the dissenting opinion. I want the acknowledgement that, hey, you know what? When this was first presented, some of us didn't think this was a great idea, and we had to come around on our own.
But that's that.
Because that happens.
It's in the scriptures.
That happens in
stuff in the
all
scriptures,
decisions that they make.
Right, but we don't get to see or hear that. So culturally, what you get is, the brethren said this, and if you question it, you're a bad person. I want the example from a church leader saying, when they first talked about going from 3 hours to 2 hours, I wasn't on board. Why have Sunday school every other week? What's wrong with Sunday school every week? And as we talked about it, and as I prayed about it, yes, okay, this is something we would...
I think your point is that
make it normal for people to have questions, as opposed to...
Or have authoritative voices.
Because the culture will never change otherwise.
Your point is that the leaders, the First Presidency and the 12, get a chance to work through everything, whereas the culture doesn't allow the members to go
because we do have an opportunity to work through things ourselves.
We do.
In private.
We do.
But the culture doesn't allow for you to...
give a testimony about it.
Right.
People would start... okay.
Yeah, I'm saying the culture is never...
Sunday school teacher,
the culture's never going to change otherwise.
Okay, here's a messier component to add to it, too. What if we're talking about worldwide cultures? There's a lot of different cultures that interact and intersect with this. And if we're talking about the leadership of the church having to present a unified front, there are certain cultures in the world where bringing up that dissent would be... Like in China, you don't do stuff like that. You handle your China and Japan and a lot of stuff. All that happens behind closed doors. There's a lot of unspoken stuff that, and it's like the thing that is said is not necessarily everybody in the room knows that's not necessarily 100% what they mean. There's those levels, and then there's United States East Coast people, right? And they're the exact opposite. They're like, we're gonna yell and raise our voices and talk about stuff, and I'm gonna have my opinion, and you're gonna have yours, and we still love each other, and we're still a family, and this is what we do. You
mean like this?
Yeah.
Yes, like this.
And for us, for people like us, and I'm kind of from a family background like that, it's really refreshing to have times in the church where you can just be like that, but think of all the overlapping stuff we've got going on.
Right.
I don't know what the answer is.
I'm just saying.
I don't know what the...
Well, and that's why I said the culture in the church, but specifically here in Utah, the culture is.
But it's everywhere, too. It's everywhere,
But it's never going to change.
So I think it will change. And
I think it's just going to get worse.
No, I think it will change. But I think this is the wheat and the tares thing. It'll get worse and people will flake off. But because let's take it all the way back. Let's take it all the way back to the war in heaven. The discussion that people had to have been an open discussion where people said, I don't like this idea. This is not very good. We're all going to fail. No, don't worry. This whole thing's going to be planned out. And then you get the people in the middle saying, And so I think that'd
be great. Present an idea in conference. This isn't the change. We're talking about this. What do people think?
Well,
let's get the big discussion going and broadcast that on BYU TV and watch and see how many people tune in.
I don't think
I could sell tickets to that.
Yeah. Well, and Yeah, that's why it's messy. And
It's messy,
It is.
but I'm
Yeah.
saying the cultural layer, because you have the
Yeah.
doctrinal, this is the gospel, then you have the church policy, then you have the
cultural overlay.
The
Yeah.
cultural layer is so heavy.
Yeah.
It doesn't let you work between the
It's true.
first
And-
two.
No, I think you're right.
Because it's got this big, huge. It's like this big weighted blanket that doesn't let you work between the other two
And
and
some
figure it
people
out.
are fortunate enough to be in areas or in wards or know people
Right.
that they can be genuine and they can say, I have
and
a
there are-
problem with this, and they're loved and accepted because
And I'm
that.
sure there are people
And
out
then
there
there's
thinking,
people who-
"Oh, my ward would love me if I had questions and I was struggling, and people would support me." There are people who listen who are like, "Yeah, my ward, I could never even get
there's
a,
other
a
places where
sniff."
they
This is
absolutely
this is
of
what we hear.
questions.
This is what we hear from some of our listeners who say, "Thank heaven that you're here because I can have that conversation."
Mm-hmm.
Some people
With the radio,
have
yeah.
told us, "I have the conversation with you
Uh-huh.
as you're talking about this because I can't go to my neighbors and have the conversation."
Well, and where it gets really dangerous is in cases like the LGBT kids, who
Right.
live in the areas where it's just the big
Yeah.
smothering blanket, and
There
to
are-
them, there's no way out. To them, it's everything is all just heaped on top of them.
There are some things I
know?
can't understand. I can't understand how they would be feeling. I mean, I can imagine how I would feel if, I was being told these things, but, in order to have that level of understanding, you have to kind of been able to go through it or be able to I can empathize.
We can get more
I can
compassionate when we
imagine-
know people and we hear their
Right.
stories, which I think is important.
But I can't say, "Oh, I understand how you feel."
Right.
I don't have a freaking clue. I can imagine how you feel. I can imagine how I would feel. But man, I can't go to someone and say, "Oh, I understand how you feel."
Yeah, I agree with that.
I can't.
No, I agree with that.
So,
All right.
anyway, anything else about conference we want to talk about?
Wow.
Other than that, no big changes. There were rumors
8 new
about other
temples.
things.
8 new temples
Which was
announced in conference.
Yeah.
There had been a rumor that they were going to stop announcing in conference.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
That I didn't tell you I was.
Yeah.
And I don't know how I feel about it. I can go one way or the other. I'm going to let you talk me into a position on
Oh
this.
boy.
Before the temples are announced, President Nielsen gets up. Please do not call out. If something's exciting to you, bow your head and say a thankful, in your head.
Yeah.
Last conference, when they were announcing it, it was
People
a woo.
were
There was
cheering. People were cheering.
and they said, "We're glad you're excited. It's good to be excited." And this time he just, put his foot down beforehand and said, "This is not going to happen."
The person after you wouldn't hear theirs. That's why.
In
It's because
part.
when you said Tooele, Utah, you'd be like, well, and then the next person he said, people sitting next to you
In part.
who wanted to hear wouldn't be able to.
But
So-
last conference,
Don't you
and
I was happy. Look, like last conference, if you remember, we said, I really love to hear the cheering. I understand President Nelson. I really do. When he made that announcement, please.
Because he said
This is
in order
reverent.
to keep it, to keep the spirit and the reverence of the meeting.
Keep it reverent. Keep it.
To me, the cheering didn't remove the spirit and the reverence of the meeting. It was.
I like the cheering because it was the people speaking, but.
That's like that.
Let
That's
them
not like a Republican. You lie.
No.
No. If he announced a temple and somebody booed, okay. Now we got to draw a line somewhere. Okay.
Temple.
What do you mean Tooele gets a temple? No, screw
No,
those guys.
no,
Well,
you can't get to it.
what about the implicit message it's sending to other places? I always try to think about things in conference because I've listened to translated conference and I hear a lot of things. I'm like, that's not going to translate, you guys. You can't stop using those kind of stories. But think of a tiny group of people in the Philippines and they hear the big room full of people that oh yeah, and then there's another one in Salt Lake Valley. The implicit communication is that the Utah church is better and more important.
I think
I think that's just the people in the room.
But yes, but
Yeah, I know,
but
but
there's
that-
the people in the room,
that's a-
and that's why.
That's a discourse. That's a thing that goes out there. To the
I
world.
went on Facebook after he made the announcement, and people were saying yay and stuff and reacting on Facebook. That's
Right.
great.
Yeah.
And I get it. He says, let's just keep the spirit
In the room.
There were people who said things in conference. Elder Holland, when he said, look, if you find yourself always being late or not being to church because your ox is always in the mire, it's time to sell the ox or fill the mire. I applauded. I'm sitting in my living room and I'm applauding. And your mom says
that got a lot of traction on social media.
Yeah.
A lot of people
but the point is,
keyed on that.
She said afterwards, she said, do people ever clap at the end of conference talks? No. And there's a good reason.
Well, no, and you don't clap in sacrament meetings.
But it's the same thing. If they're cheering the announcement.
Let's talk about cultural differences.
But I don't think it...
Again,
there's cultures where that's what you do. You celebrate, like, the Polynesian cultures, there's Hispanic cultures and stuff where it's like, yeah. And then there's ones where you don't, and that you show the solemnity. And we're trying to mix all of that, and I think that's why...
So I wasn't against... I wasn't opposed to that. I understood why he did it, and that was fine. Let me tell you...
I'm not saying I was opposed to it. To me, it didn't detract from the spirit of the meeting last time. I don't think it... If you were sitting in the room and somebody cheered because Tonga was getting a temple, I don't think you can. Well, that ruined the meeting for me. The spirit left. I'm out.
No, I think it was.
Well, that was disappointing.
I feel like it was courtesy to give equal time to all of the
I think maybe that was it. I think maybe that was it.
Right, I think the way he said it was the way I took it when he said it was. It would like drive the spirit out of the meeting. And in order to keep the solemn,
look. This is an administration issue. This isn't even a doctrine. This isn't even a policy issue.
This is so far down below policy that it doesn't matter.
This is an administration issue. Okay, so I'm not going to take.
I liked the cheering. I liked people being able to respond.
I liked the cheering last time. But I'm fine with the no cheering as well.
Last time was the first time, I think. Other than like the occasional single woo from the back, you never had the cheering. And so I'm fine with it either way. I don't...
Yeah, I am too. That's the point.
I think he was trying to show equal respect to all the different temples being announced. I think that's
interesting.
How it came across.
Yeah, so he announced a date, April 19th. They're gonna
release the plans.
Release the plans for the old Salt Lake Temple. I think that's going to be exciting. I think that, St. George, Manti, Logan. I think those are going to be exciting upgrades. My guess is Salt Lake is going to go to the movie just like every other place.
I think that's why the old Pioneer temples are the ones getting revamped.
Yes, I think that's what's going to happen. So no more reciting, which, if you've never seen it live, the endowment section live, it can be strange.
It's from another time.
It is from another time and another place. Now, I want to talk about the Hungary temple, Budapest, because your mom said, "Wow, Budapest," and I said, "Really?" Just remember that the closest temple to the Eastern countries is the one that was in the former East Germany. That's the closest. That's the nearest one,
depending on where you were.
Yeah, there's one in Ukraine now, but it's
Ukraine, but it's down south.
Yeah.
And so if you're in Poland, if you're in Hungary, if you're in Czechoslovakia, if you're basically schlepping to Germany, Budapest is the next step over. We don't have one in Russia, do we?
There's one announced in Russia. They don't have it.
They don't have it built.
They don't have. I don't think they have the place.
Nailed
down. Russia's being pretty hard to get along with.
The not only Russia but also the Russian Orthodox Church is being very, very difficult to deal with. Although this is totally out of the conversation we're having. I was watching something where there was a story. Somebody was showing that fully 20%, 2 in 5 Russian citizen wants to leave Russia. 2 in 5, 20%.
That's 40%.
Well, 2 in 5. So
that's 40%.
40%? No, so it was 20%. 20%. So 1 in 5.
So 1 in 5.
1 in 5. And let me get the number wrong. Maybe it was 2 in 5. But anyway, a large group of Russians, when asked, say, "Yeah, we want to leave Russia," and in the show showed a picture of Putin and said something like, "Yeah, we give you a 2-minute head start."
Oh man!
Yikes.
So, and I don't know why, but I think Russia is going to give us trouble. Russia is going to be trouble for the gospel for a long time.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on because we've been talking about this for a long time.
We've done a lot of talking.
So, people listening like, yeah. Okay.
Make sure to listen to part 2 of our General Conference Recap. This week's episode was produced and edited by Marlo Balmanno, and our theme music is a selection from Tate Peterson's Midday Blues. Don't forget, if you want to contact us, please email us at latterdayleft@gmail.com or find us on Facebook and Twitter.